Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to Piper Carter Podcast. You are listening to Piper Carter, your host. And come on in, come on in, come on in. I'm going to go over here to the chat. I want to welcome y'all. Today is Tuesday. It's 8 p.m. Eastern time. And the showrunner talking about the intersection of hip hop feminism and environmental justice. And part of the reason that I want to do this is because a lot of the work that I do centers on cultural organizing and environmental justice, and how I use hip hop within those spaces. And you know, increasingly, um, it has been becoming more diabolical in terms of, and maybe it's always been this bad. Let me be clear. Maybe it's always been this bad, and maybe we just weren't as aware of how diabolical things have been. Um, and so with that, I want to say that a lot of what I see online is people. I've noticed that a lot of people have said that they kind of want to disconnect because it's too much. Um, and I guess I'm just one of those people that has wanted to dive in more. You know, I have. I'm a member of several different environmental justice and climate justice organizations and arts and culture organizations. I used to own a space. I think I've told y'all so many times about the trauma of being a Black woman and owning a space and being successful in Detroit, and the attacks that were raged against me, and personally, financially, emotionally, and the ways in which I fought and resisted against that, and became more aware of the way things work, particularly in the city of Detroit, but as it pertains to capitalism, in terms of the ways in which capital has control over our very existence, and the way people who have been elected misuse their power, and the ways in which they could use their power for good, and how we as citizens are actually the power. We're actually the government. And so for me, coming from a Detroit where it was Black led, and led by Black people who knew about jazz and, R&B, if you will, and soul and funk and good food and good times and family and people and Black liberation and Black history, and just being around so many prominent Black leaders. And I'm going to use the word strong Black leaders because for me, a strong Black leader is someone who stands with and for the issues of the people. And so that's the Detroit that I come from. And so the Detroit that I came to as an adult disappointed me greatly because I saw lots of people who just wanted to have a job and be, financially secure, and they have a political job, which is very different than having a quote unquote like regular job. And, people just aren't doing their job. And so for me, that was disheartening because, again, I don't come from that Detroit. And so Detroit is a city of artists. Detroit is a city of people who come from a lineage of workers and hard workers, if you will. And so there is a pride that folks in Detroit took from not having to have a college degree and not having to be so-called respectable in order to make a decent living. And these are people who had what we would consider low formal education, who come from farmers and sharecroppers and people who made it through Jim Crow, and the people who created Motown, and the people who created the energy that was on Hastings Street, and the people who created the energy that put the world on wheels, and that continues to put the world on wheels. And so that is a lineage. It's also a lineage of people who resisted, right? I don't want to just put it in that. Like, we have a long line of people in Detroit who are, dare I say, leaders of the fight for Black liberation. And so, and many of them were women, right? We talk about feminism. A lot of people are afraid of feminism because they're like, ooh, what's that? But in general, feminism basically means that the way in which things exist in this capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist system are skewed so that anyone who doesn't fit within that is destroyed, left out, marginalized, and all the things. And so, for me, a feminist is someone who believes that women's lives matter, if you will, and will fight for that and uphold that and work to make sure that women have access to their power, if that makes sense, within the system. So it's not a scary thing. It's actually what we as Black people have always done. We don't have to use that word feminism if it scares people. It's just a word so that everyone can understand more or less what we're talking about. We just have to talk about it more so that more people understand it. And until and unless there's a different word, that's the word that we're using in this moment. But with that, that's a little explanation of the showrunner, a hip hop, feminist conversation about the state of the environment. So I want to say peace to Ben Frank. Peace. What's up? Hip hop community is in the building. Um, and so, yeah, I wonder, do folks even know what is the state of the environment? I know that we're consistently seeing on, well, let me go backwards. When we're talking about the environment, we're talking about clean air, clean water, um, clean soil. So the land, but also that the original people who were the caretakers of this land have access to the land. Of course, we know that as indigenous people or people from the African diaspora, we don't technically believe that anyone owns the land, that we're caretakers of this land. But because we're caught in this system, we know that it's important for us to have things like titles and deeds to property because that's how we secure them. And so that whole process, we believe that Black people who built this country um, should have access to purchasing land. And that goes into environmental justice. We also believe that people's lives are important. And so environmental justice is also the people, right? We're talking about the planet and the people. You've seen me bring a lot of people on here. Shouts out to Monica Lewis Patrick of We the People Detroit, who has come on here and talk about the water crisis in Flint and Detroit multiple times. We know that this year is an election year, and so we know that there is a piece of state legislature around water affordability that State Senator Stephanie Chang is putting forth. So we want to, even though as environmental justice activists, we fight for what we call water amnesty. Um, we still want to get behind that bill because it's going to make sure that everyone has access to fresh, clean water. And if you don't know about what's going on in Detroit regarding water, if you're poor, you probably know because they have an aggressive plan shutting off 100,000 people from fresh, clean water. And many of our elected officials believe that poor people should not have access to fresh, clean water, even though we're made of 70% water and the earth is made of 70% water. And if you do not have access to water for more than 3 days, you could die. And also, too, that in military operations when they want to control the people or a village or gain advantage. What do they do? The first thing they do is cut off the water to the people. And so that's what has happened in the city of Detroit. Its government has, and around the state of Michigan, has declared war on its people and has been doing aggressive water shutoffs. And so we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. If you live in Detroit or Flint or any so-called urban industrialized city where there's black people and brown people, you'll know there is a crisis with lead. Lead, as we know, causes all kinds of problems. If you stayed up with the Flint water crisis, you'll know the damage that lead does to one's body, to one's brain, and that children under the age of 5 who have been exposed to lead have permanent brain damage, and pregnant women as well are at risk, elders, um, disabled people. But why we would want anyone to ever have not have access to fresh, clean water is beyond me. Also, too, we know, and keep saying it is no more, that in the city of Detroit, with the Department of Water and Sewage, that when they come, if you owe money, even as low as like 2 cents, when they come to cut your water off, they're coming with the Detroit Police Department and the CPS, Child Protective Services. And what happens is the parent gets accused of neglect and abuse and has to prove that they are not abusing and neglecting their child. And they say that because they say that the children do not have access to water. And then what they do is they remove the child from the home, they put them in juvenile detention, and then the parent has to spend time, even if they go, borrow the money and pay the bill, they still have to go prove that they are not abusing and neglecting their child and fight to get their child back. There's many other issues with water. We know that there's been a lot of flooding, and the city of Detroit was supposed to pay people back for the damage that was done in your basements, and we know they have not done so. And so they keep saying if you go to them, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we hooked you up." They haven't done it. I don't know who they helped. I don't know whose basement. Raise your hand if they helped your basement, because I don't know one soul whose basement has been restored. There's that. So yeah, so it's on a state level and it's also on a federal level, a piece of legislation, Rashida Tlaib. So both of those. So Rashida Tlaib's Congress, obviously for the US, but that whole bill came right down here from Detroiters, Monica Lewis Patrick, We the People of Detroit, People's Water Board, fighting for those bills to be on the table. And so, like I said, Rashida Tlaib has one has a one of the bills, the Clean Water Act, and that's on the federal level, and then Senator Stephanie Chang on the state level. So we want to look out for both of those bills and make sure that we're supporting those bills. Another thing I wanted to talk about briefly is when we're talking about, so that's water. And when we're talking about environmental justice, we're talking about air quality. Again, come to the state of Michigan, come to the city of Detroit, come to Southwest Detroit. Shouts out to Teresa Landrum, who is from the zip code 48217. And if you don't know, now you know that 48217 is the most polluted zip code in the state. They have Marathon factory is right there. The Marathon plant is right there, killing people with all that smoke and disgusting waste and pollution. And Marathon is so diabolical. What they did, they gave the Kemeny Community Center that's there some dough. And then we're like, "You see, it's okay that we poisoned you because look, we gave you a community center." And when it first started happening and white folks started noticing they were getting sick and their hair was falling out and all of that, um, they complained some years ago, like 20 plus, maybe 25, 30 years ago. They went to Marathon. Marathon was like, "Oh, we care about your life. So we're going to give you some money to buy a house and move and all of that." So all the white folks that lived down there were able to sell their house and move. But guess what? The black people were not. and they were not told. Doesn't that sound familiar? Kind of like a Juneteenth type situation. So they weren't even informed. Like they kept complaining about smells and choking and the gas and not being able to breathe. And people started getting all types of diseases and hair falling out and all. It was just all types of things happening to people, and they were being ignored. And secretly, they were letting white folks sell their house and move and get up out and do the thing. And it wasn't till like decades later that when black people were able to get their own data and prove what was happening to them, that's when they were like, oh, and they sued and all types of stuff, but it was Marathon, US Steel, and a bunch of other polluters are right there in Southwest Detroit. And so yeah, they're still fighting. If you can, I can't fathom, but they're still fighting because those folks can't sell their house because no one wants to buy a house in a polluted area, and they can't afford to move. So they're just continuing to fight, to have to get their reparations, to get money to buy a new home, to help them with medical bills, to fight to get these polluters out of their communities. And they have been meeting with elected officials, fighting against elected officials, writing elected officials, protesting, and all the things. And they are still not being listened to or taken seriously. So, shouts out to the zip code in Detroit, 48217, most polluted zip code in the state, is continuing to fight. So much love to Teresa Landrum. I'm going to bring her on here at some point to talk about that. Also, too, so speaking of air quality, do want to talk about a win really quickly with our homie KT. And KT was with Breathe Free Detroit. I do want to say with our folks at EMEAC, our long-standing activists, shouts out to all types of folks. Amina, Charity, Maymuna Hicks, rest in peace. Um, Owalabi, at the time his name was Will C. There's a lot of people who fought for a long time, like 20 years, to have the Detroit incinerator shut down, and they finally got it shut down. But guess what? They didn't shut it down because these activists had 20 years of data and 20 years of pictures and 20 years of debates and 20 years of suing and all the things that they had, which they did have. That never convinced anyone. It wasn't until the city of Detroit decided that they wanted to gentrify that area, and they couldn't have that air quality for the nice white folks that wanted to move into that area, into those developments. And so that's when they shut down the incinerator. So, but guess what? They used all the data and pictures and video and testimonies and, court documents to have it shut down. Um, Also, too, when we talk about, so that's air. So we talked about water, we talked about air. Let's talk about land and soil. Of course, if your air quality and your water quality are suffering from lead, pollution, toxic waste, and all the things, obviously that's going into your soil and contaminating your soil. Thus, we know that lead, one side effect, if you will, of lead is, I'm gonna say, like anger and aggression that you'll notice in people, right? But also all types of liver. I mean, if they're asking us to breathe in all these gases like Marathon is, it's releasing methane into the air. And if you look up methane and breathing, or methane air in the air quality, if you look up anything like that, it's poison. So they're basically poisoning. And if you think that poisoning the water supply and poisoning the air is only affecting the black people who live in poor areas, you're sorely mistaken, because we all have to breathe this air, and we all have to share this water, and these pollutants are going down into our soil. And so, we have all of our urban gardens, all our urban farms. Me, myself, even though I had a soil test, I live in a heavily industrial neighborhood, which, by the way, I'm going to go to that in a second. I'm jumping all over the place, but let me jump there real quick. I talked about power before, and the Detroit that I come from, the power brokers, the elected officials, the black folks who the people put in place to lead in these spaces would not have let these corporations control all of these resources in the way that our contemporary politicians do. And there's an organization that you see us do a lot of collaboration with, and they are called People's Platform. Shouts out to Linda Campbell. And People's Platform does a lot of education around justice in general, right? But something that they did was they created this dope ass, and I'm gonna bring Theo on here. Kari's had Theo on. Detroit is different, but I'm gonna bring him on here. This like racial environmental justice tool, and it basically lets like you check the certain boxes, and it lets you know like if a project is or isn't environmentally just. I do want to say that our politicians, allow these corporations to come into where we live and do whatever they want to do, build whatever they want to build, and they don't make them be accountable to the environment, to the people. They'll tell us, "Oh, well, this is going to bring jobs." But my thing is, you're telling me this plant is going to bring first of all, we didn't ask for this plant. And what People's Platform does is help people create um like a I want to call it People's Movement Assembly, but it's not a People's Movement Assembly. It's a community benefits agreement. And basically, with community benefits agreement, what that does, the community gets to come together and decide what they want and don't want in the community specifically. And our politicians have said that they don't think that the people have enough sense or can make decisions for their community. And my thing is, if Detroit is, what do they say, is a 70% illiterate city, maybe people are illiterate to like reading, books, or which I'm not downplaying books, but I'm saying maybe they're illiterate in that way. But let me let you know that they're not illiterate in terms of like reading people and reading bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And Detroiters know bullshit and people. You know what I'm saying? It's spiritual energy. And for me, it doesn't matter if you can read the law or don't understand the law. No one understands the law for real. That's why attorneys interpret the law. And that's why you can have someone do something heinous and go free, and someone be innocent and get locked up, because the law is up to interpretation. And that's what's the purpose of attorneys and judges, to interpret the law and interpret, what should happen. And I'm saying that to say that the same thing happens on a community level, and that a basic environmental justice principle is that the most impacted people are the ones who should make the decisions as to what happens for themselves. And believe you me, you don't need to know the law to know that you don't want pollution in your community, that if a corporate polluter comes to your community, that they need to, be accountable for their waste. And number one, we don't want you here, right? But let's say the projects that have to come, if people decide that they want projects to come, they should decide, like, okay, these are our terms. And also, if you got so much money, then that money needs to go into community. However, the community decides that the money needs to go there. So whether that is to, you know, put more, greenery around so that it can soak up uh the toxic waste, or whether there's some sort of mitigation or drainage, or um shoot, they should be paying people's medical bills for real. And then they say, well, we're going to hire people. And this is my thing. They're always talking about some crap like a development or this and that is going to hire some people. First of all, if you want a developer, any developer that wants to come to your community, they need to meet with the community to see if the development is something that the community even wants, because the community might not want high price housing that is going to drive the housing market way up. They might not want avocado toast. They might not want a butcher. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that like, like we don't want those things. I mean, avocado toast tastes good. I'm vegan, but if you're gonna eat meat, then yeah, go kill it yourself and eat it. I get that. Or know where it's or see where it's coming from. Or go tell somebody go kill it and then you can watch them skin it and eat it, whatever. But I'm just saying, like, no one ever comes to community to be like, hey, there's a developer that wants to come in here. They're looking at your neighborhood. We want you to assemble people and come together and create a list of demands and come listen to what they want to bring in your community. And then we want y'all to decide if you want them to come or not. People just don't do that. You have to fight for that. Like we have to fight for that. And so we fight for things like community benefits agreement, and our politicians will go behind our backs and like make agreements with these developers or corporations. And when the corporations say, oh, I'm going to give you 16,000 jobs, but number one, who cares if you got 16,000 jobs and this thing that you're building is creating all this toxic waste and everyone's going to get cancer and brain damage and liver damage and all that? Who cares? And you act like the 16,000 jobs are these high paying jobs that's going to get people out of poverty. They're the same low wage, nothing, bullshit job as working at McDonald's flipping fries. You're going to make maybe the same amount of money. A meaningless, go nowhere job that just serves the corporate machine. And also, too, even if are jobs that do pay like a livable wage with benefits or even a decent salary or a supervisor or whatever, black people are not getting those jobs. They're going to give those jobs to white folks that live outside our community. And when in Detroit is such a racist place in terms of like Michigan, like the state of Michigan is so red, meaning like when they show it when you vote and you see all the little dots are red. Like Michigan is such a red, right wing, racist, white supremacist state that there's pockets. Like Detroit is blue, but barely blue, right? Because we have Duggan. Um, and I don't care what anyone says, Duggan is on the right wing side of things, just like Biden. Um, and by right wing, I mean conservative and, racist and anti-black. And I don't care how many black people are on your staff. That doesn't mean you're not anti-black. If you have anti-black policies, you're anti-black. If your decisions harm black people, you're anti-black. If you have so-called power and money and you don't have black people that have black people's back at the table making decisions and ideating the decisions and not asking them, making decisions and turn around and ask them, what do you think? Like if like, oh, we want to build a pocket park. Did you ask the people, do they want a pocket park? Do you know how many parks are in my neighborhood? We don't need one more park. And as an environmental justice person, I know that sounds crazy, but listen to me, hear me good. Parks are in the hood, parks are dangerous, yo. Parks are where people go to do drugs. Parks are where kids get snatched up. Parks are where people get murdered. Parks are where fights happen. Like parks are where people get RAPED. Like parks are freaking dangerous. You want to know what people need? People need a grocery store, bro. People need to own their home. People need real access to uh employment or jobs that's meaningful work where they make a livable wage. People need health care. How about that? And they say, "Oh, you're gonna go to a park for your mental health." Do you know how stressful it is to live in the hood and be a black person? We avoid the parks. That's why you go to any hood in Detroit, ain't nobody at no park. Maybe Belle Isle, of course. Maybe Chandler Park. You know what I mean? Like a couple of those big parks. I'm talking about pocket parks, like the park that's like down the street, round the corner on like Finkel. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody goes to those parks, bro. Like I'm just saying, it's a lot of warped, dangerous memories in most of those parks. You know what I'm saying? And mm, hold on, I just been talking and talking. Let me check the chat. Peace, y'all. How y'all doing? Piper Carter podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in. The showrunner is a hip hop feminist conversation about the state of the environment. I'm gonna go backwards here to some of these, and I'm gonna say, hey, peace, y'all. At large group said that's what let me start putting these up here. At large group said, yeah, that's what happens when you let the suburbs come in and hijack the water. Um, yeah, land and water. Oh wait, so Ben Frank said ions too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so okay, at large group says the 70% illiteracy is not a lie. I don't know, bro. I know for sure 70% of people that live in my on my block are illiterate. I say that with love, you know what I mean? But let me let me know what you think. Peace. Hey, Yolanda McNair. Y'all remember Yolanda? Um, I'm trying to think when. Well, I don't remember the month, y'all, but Yolanda came on here and Protect Our Stolen Treasures post talked about her organization and her story and all the stuff that she's got going on. Protect Our Stolen Treasures is doing some great work around supporting the parents of people who have had their young people slain by police. And the way Yolanda deals with it is she supports the parents, she helps them get resources, and then she also does life affirming events and provides support all year long for people. And at her life affirming events, it's like bringing community together. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so that's dope. Okay, boom. So, okay, so we talked about that. All right, then uh transportation. Transportation is a part of environmental justice. I don't know, again, People's Platform does have a program around transportation. I know everyone's talking about these EV vehicles and all this kind of thing. So this is the thing about that. You still they're trying to push EV, like EV is so clean. EV is not that clean. Um what I mean by that is, number one, you're still on, most of these vehicles are not full EV, right? So you still have to deal with gas or, petroleum or whatever you want to call it. Um Also too, the waste from the electricity, and what that has on our grid. Our grid is already, I know I'm on my phone like 247, and I know most of us are on our phones 247. Imagine all the electricity we already put on our grid. So now we're going to put all of our transportation on the grid too. I'm going to bring in a transportation expert to like break down the science, but the short of it is we don't want this for real. I'm not trying to be like anti electric car. I am saying that we don't need as many vehicles as we have. I am saying that I know Detroit is a motor city, and I know people are constantly, that are these companies are making all these cars, but how many lots are just sitting with cars that were made for how many decades that were never purchased. Can you imagine? And then they take those and they turn them into trash. My gosh. Our poor ocean, you know. So there's that. Consumerism is our actual enemy. Also, too, I want to say that, in Detroit, there has been a anti public transit, uh, I'm going to say like conspiracy. It's not a theory, against Detroit having a public transportation system, whether it's a subway, high speed rail, or even a functioning, bus system. Uh, and that's been pretty consistent for, I want to say, at least 50 years, which is my whole life. And so, with that, they want to force everyone to like buy a car. But obviously, there's all the things that come with that, like insurance. Detroit is such an insurance scam. I got to show this bill to my husband. I got this bill today for the car insurance. They want $850 for what is it, like a 2012 or something? Um, what is that? It's not Hyundai. I'm trying to think what it's called. Kia. They want like $850 a month for like a 2012 paid off Kia. The other car is a, what is it, 2010 Chevy Equinox, and they want like, $800 a month for that. And I'm like, if I put in, I put in too, if I put in an address that's like about 5 blocks over, maybe 10, maybe like 5 to 10 blocks over, meaning like in the suburbs, it's $250, right? So they're gouging Detroiters for insurance, right? A lot of Detroiters don't have insurance. They're like, you know what? I'm gonna ride dirty. I'm not paying. They scamming. I'm not doing it. And then what happens? You get caught, you get tickets, you get this, you get that. If you got anything else, that's how they get you. You know what I mean? Um, and then, the ones that do pay, we're paying out the nose. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, it's also a depressed economy. So there's no jobs. And so what's strange about Detroit is the people who live in the city can't work in the city because there's no jobs in the city that that so-called, qualified people, they say that Detroiters are not qualified to work in the city. So the majority of the jobs that are in the city are uh, done by people who don't live in the city. And conversely, a lot of Detroiters have to work outside the city. And so what does that mean? That means that people have to get to work. And so they need proper transportation. But again, a lot that, they say that the average income in Detroit is around 20K, right? Which is way below the national average of poverty. And so if people have all these low wage jobs, right, and they live outside the city and they're either paying this exorbitant car insurance or they need public transportation, number one, they're either being gouged or they're taking a chance because they're riding dirty, or they're spending a huge chunk of their time trying to get back and forth to work. And if they have children school age, they have to make sure that their kids are getting back and forth to school. And if they work more than one job, then they have to get back and forth between jobs and home and the things that their kids have to do and anything else. And so this life in Detroit it's already rough because the weather is cold and dreary and dark much of the time. And people don't make that much money, and the local officials don't support the, you know, things that would make life better for people, like public transportation, like development projects where the citizens benefit from the money that goes into building the project. And then another thing that our elected officials do is they tend to uh what's the word I'm trying to say? Allow these corporations to just come here and not invest properly into the infrastructure of the city. So there's many projects that um are, where the billionaire and millionaire developers are have not paid the tax, are not owed tax, I'm sorry, are not being required to pay the same taxes, whereas the citizens in Detroit are overtaxed. And we've seen that there is actually I believe there's going to be a class action lawsuit, but there's going to definitely be a lawsuit around Detroiters being over assessed for taxes, right? And so, anywho, Rudy Tootie, I could go on and on and on about these things. I'm just going to go back to the chat for a minute. Um, and see what y'all said. Motor City, yeah. What did you say? So, at large group said the taxes downtown needs to come back to the people instead of staying downtown. They get loans on the backs of the people and get nothing in return. So to prove that point, um there's the I think it's the Illiches built the Pizzarena, the what is it called? The arena downtown, the big one. I can't even think of it. We always call it Pizza Arena. I don't forgot the proper name. But the Illiches built that, and I know People's Platform had led for us to have community benefits because there was so much money that it was going to make. And for those of you who don't live here, it's basically an arena that houses the Pistons where they play basketball and the Red Wings where they play hockey. Michelle Obama had her book um, opening or book tour there. There's a lot of big concerts, that happen there. And it's right in like a concert center. So the Fox Theater is there, and the it's not called the state, the Fillmore Theater is there, and the Tiger Stadium is across the street, and the Ford Field where the Lions play is across the street, and there's all these um arenas and things around there. I think the Google office moved right there, and a few more other things moved there. I think Eminem and Kid Rock own like that pizza bar or something that's like right down the street. But any hootie Rudy Tootie, uh, what is it called? Little Caesars. Thank you. The Little Caesars Arena. How could I not think of that? The Little Caesars Arena. I always call it the Pizza Arena, but the Little Caesars Arena. So the Illiches built that. And when they were building it, they requested to get 30% of the money that was supposed to go to the schools. Now, if you know anything about Detroit public schools, even though education is paid for by the state, there is a percentage that would go to the schools. And our schools are completely, severely underfunded, meaning even more than when I was going to school, in the 80s. Mold in the buildings, lead in the water. And that's just like some infrastructure stuff. Teachers severely underpaid, no counselor. How do you have 1,500 kids in a poor area and let's say many of them, majority of them, come from quote unquote at risk situations and at quote unquote broken homes. and all the trauma that they have to deal with from the impact of poverty, and you don't have a counselor. That should be criminal, you know. They don't have a counselor. If they do have a counselor, they have like one counselor. How do you have one counselor? Do you know how much death these kids see in a semester, much less a year? Do you know how traumatized these kids are? And I'm saying that from having worked in schools from uh 2011 to like 2000 and what 16, and sometimes now. I mean, our young people have a lot of trauma that they are unable to process with anyone that they're holding on to, and really don't have tools, and the parents don't have tools, and the teachers don't have tools, and the level of training that needs to happen inside of schools with the people that are teaching our children, because remember, they made it a free for all. So for the past, like, I don't know, decade and a half, you have this like impact of this Teach for America. So you got these little gentrified white girls that think they're doing something, that are transitioning and trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life, because they definitely don't want to be a teacher. So they just teach for a minute in this little training program while they figure their life out, while they when once they've like either while they're still in school, most of them. And these kids are just on their training wheels, like, and they're in charge of like educating our children. And they say that, and then our kids have Airmark, they eat Airmark food. I don't know if y'all know Airmark. I gotta get on the black food sovereignty, but Airmark is a food company. They provide the food for the schools and the prisons. They also do for a lot of museums and things as well. But um also to the police. They have decided that our little babies in elementary school and nursery school are so dangerous that they got to put police in there as security. And by the way, an aside, if you're they start developing for the school to prison pipeline a record of your kids. So if they get into a skirmish in preschool, they start documenting it, and that actually builds their police record, and they label them as aggressive or whatever. And then, you know, um, let's say, as things move on, by the time they get to the ripe age that they like to get them around 16, uh, that's when they can actually, snatch their body and put them into that dark, cold place uh, called prison. And so, all of this is a part of environmental justice. All this is a part of environmental justice. I also want to say, uh, regarding Black food sovereignty. Wait, let me go back to the Illich point. Let me close the loop on that. The reason that's so diabolical is because they, I'm gonna repeat myself, got a tax break. The taxes that they were supposed to pay for that, meaning ticket sales or whatever, was supposed to go back into the coffers of the city, right? So that the city can do things like pay for schools. And because they decided that they would be exempt, then that money that was supposed to go for, as long as that project exists, which is um the lifetime of the stadium, however long the stadium's there, they're supposed to pay um to support, the schools. But because they got off the hook of that, because our politicians allowed them to not have to pay that, then the schools lost um like a 30%, right? They that was like they like 30% of that money that was supposed to go there, right? I'm probably not saying that properly. Trying to think of the right way to say it. Yeah, so like, yeah, it's 30% of that money supposed to go there. And so now it's not. They don't pay anything. And so we get nothing. But oh, not but they took 30% and allowed the stadium to actually get a break on that. How? Like, how do you allow a billionaire, or even if he was a millionaire, but he's close, yeah. How do you allow like a millionaire to that owns mad properties in Detroit to like not pay taxes? And you need that tax money to go to your citizenry. You need that tax money to go to things like your schools. And how do you have your schools severely underfunded and be in charge of making that decision and then side with the corporation? I my head spins on that. Um and then now let's go over to Black food sovereignty. I'm going to be doing some teachings around Black food sovereignty. Um I work with Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, and I recently am transitioning into the membership and outreach coordinator for the org. And so I wrote my little plan in some ways in which I want to beef up the membership. One thing I want to do is let people know the difference between the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network and the Detroit People's Food Co-op, which real briefly I'll say here, the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network is an organization, and community members came together to create the organization, and based on Black food sovereignty, that people should own and control the food system in a closed loop. And the organization includes the farm, D-Town Farm, which we own or we steward, um, a 10-acre community farm in the hood on Plymouth and Outer Drive of Detroit inside of Rouge Park. We grow all kinds of food, and we have available for community. And we also have youth programming where we teach young children how to grow their own food and also about healthy food choices. And then we have a program for teens where they get to learn about um, the food systems and how to create a value added product um, based on that. So, like herbs and teas and things. And then we have education programs where we, inform community, and then we do advocacy for the food system. We also did anchor and help spearhead the creation of the Detroit Black community. I'm sorry, of the Detroit People's Food Co-op. But the Detroit People's Food Co-op is a collaborative effort. It means that people become member owners. And so the people are actually owners of the co-op grocery store. And with that project, we raised about $20 million and purchased the land that's over there on Woodward and Euclid. And the organization, Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, uh, owns the building that is currently almost finished being built, that also houses 4 commercial community kitchens, where people will be able to rent the kitchens to make their food products or do catering, and it'll be licensed. And then it also will have a banquet hall, Mommy Money Humphrey Banquet Hall, that people can rent to hold their events. And so the organization we call DBCFSN will uh, actually owns the building that houses all of that. And then the cooperative grocery store actually pays rent to the organization. So it's like a complete closed loop food system within itself. And the co op will prioritize Black farmers and Black food product makers and uh obviously local first, but yeah, so that's that. And my role will be to grow the membership of the organization. And in this moment, people are struggling to understand the difference between Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network and Detroit People's Food Co-op. But again, the co-op is a cooperative endeavor where community members pay $200 for a lifetime, and they become a member owner, and they can do things like make decisions about products that are in the store and this kind of how it's operated, all this kind of thing. And that's the actual, store part, the grocery store. The organization is actually, has the farm, does the education, owns the building, the kitchens, the event space, the youth programs, the teen programs, and does the advocacy with and all these other endeavors to um support our global local food system. So yeah. I've been talking a lot. Let me go back to the chat and see what's what. I hope y'all are doing all right. All right, yeah, that's and Baba Malik is the executive director and has led a lot of the work or held the seat in leadership of a lot of the work, and he is retiring this year. And so we are hiring a co-executive director. The job application is out there. We're also hiring a farm manager if you know someone that wants to run the farm. We're also hiring a kitchen and events manager if you know someone who would like to do any of those gigs. And then also, too, we just hired the grocery store manager, general store manager. So shouts out to that. Um, so any hootie tootie, I'm gonna be doing a lot of Black food sovereignty. Um, I want to say like teachings around sovereignty, Black liberation, Black food sovereignty, and what all these things mean. And what they mean to me is being able to have access to healthy food, but also to this larger community, and that we are growing the consciousness of our people. Um, I think one misunderstanding that people have about the food co-op is they look at it like that's Baba Malik's store. It's not Baba Malik's store. It's the community's store. The community paid their $200 for the year to be a member owner. So the community owns it and the community controls it. I think a lot of people look at um, Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network, DBCFSN, as Baba Malik's organization. It's not Baba Malik's organization. He has been placed as the executive director to head the leadership because we need to have leadership for the org, but he's beholden to the board and the community and everything else. And he's done a great job in leading by taking direction. People look at it like that's Baba Malik's farm. It's not Baba Malik's farm. It's the community's farm. And all of these things, the community is welcome to participate in some of the work. I think what people misunderstand about collective work and responsibility is the work part. A lot, um, I think when we're talking about sovereignty and Black liberation and all these things, I think people talk about them with such a romantic flair, as if it's something that's like out there, and like Marcus Garvey used to do it and Malcolm X used to do it. And you know it's a concept and an idea, yes. And the benefit of having history is we have examples of people who have done these things before us. And so there are many people who have come before us who have laid foundations and done examples that we can look to. And it's very important that we look to these examples just for us to survive, to be honest, because Just like they're poisoning our water and making it unaffordable and taking our children away when we can't pay the bill, just like they're poisoning our air and then overcharging for like DTE, like uh overcharging people for energy, you know what I'm saying? And you can't even uh own your own, like, solar uh setup. I mean, you can, but it's expensive and it's difficult. And shouts out to Solidarity that's trying to help us, have access to these things. But know that there are people who are actively working against us. And I'm not saying this like it's a conspiracy theory. I'm telling you because I'm sitting at these tables. I'm sitting in a lot of these uh, commissions and boards and things like that, and fighting with people who believe that poor people are too stupid and can't make their own decisions and shouldn't, and that they shouldn't have access to the things that rich people have access to, like, being able to own their own solar. Or they think that gentrifiers should be able to come to Detroit and own, these solar, whatever, and then charge black citizens who've been already oppressed exorbitant rates, and want to keep DTE in power, and DTE wants to keep its power, and it's just a fiasco, y'all. It's a plain old fiasco. Mm. But part of what I wanted to say is, with all of that, there's I'm not just the only one. I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm here fighting for y'all. I hope I don't sound like that. I'm just saying that a lot of times people think that these things are conspiracies, and they are conspiracies. I'm confirming that they are conspiracies, and I'm just affirming that because I'm letting you know that I'm in those spaces and I'm in those meetings and I'm listening and I'm having those conversations and those fights. And so I'm going to bring uh, my comrade on here, Jesse Deeramwater, to talk about nuclear, if you can believe, of all things, because the state of Michigan is fighting they're calling nuclear clean energy. They're calling coal clean energy. There's no such thing. And they're calling natural gas clean energy. All of that is false. Those are all false. They're not true. None of those are actual solutions. Those are just corporate products that they're trying to sell. And so these are the things that we are resisting against. Um, I will say this: if you want to do something, join the Detroit Green Task Force, because that is a body, a government body that allows citizens to join it. And right now, I think I'm the only like person there that represents like the neighbors or the citizens. Like, all the rest of the people that are there work for some, although I do work for DBCFSN, I'm not there for DBCFSN. I don't represent DBCFSN when I'm there. I represent my neighborhood, Hartwell Block Club. And I encourage as many citizens as possible to get on the Green Task Force, because we need more citizenry. We need more Detroiters on there, because most of the people work for some organization, and these organizations are corporations, and these corporations have their own agendas about how they want things to go. And it's a very capitalist first agenda that does not serve the citizenry, that puts these products that they want to sell above the good and the needs of the people. And so we've got to be there to say that these are the things that we do or don't want. And we have to interrupt when they try to tell us, otherwise. Um, What did it just say? At large group says DTE gets its energy from the state of Michigan processing plants. The people of the state subsidize DTE. So thank you for that. And so with that, so I went to a hearing, not I, we comrades went to a hearing at the Energy Commission and spoke against them continuing to subsidize DTE because we were saying that people have a lot of down wires and that DTE was charging these exorbitant rates and not giving good service, and um, that they were blocking people being able to own community, own solar. And they say that they were unaware of all of this. It is on record, but these are the boring things that we have to do. Let me tell you something. A lot of these meetings and a lot of these decisions that get made, they're made behind closed doors because, like, for instance, the Green Task Force, when the meetings are? The meetings are at like 2 o'clock on like a Thursday. Who is around at 2 o'clock on a Thursday? I will say that I do have the privilege because of the nature of the work that I do. I can be like, hey, can I go to the Green Task Force meeting? Because it does align very much with my job, especially because I'm the environmental justice coordinator. Mm. But most people are not able to go. I mean, also, too, when you go to these things, they're very boring. I mean, it's very hard to stay awake while these people are talking. Um, It's hard to understand what they're talking about unless you do a goo gabba jibba dabba research, which I'm always doing some research on this stuff, and it's very hard to follow and very hard to understand. And then when they go to these meetings, and I'm not only talking about Green Task Force, I'm just talking about like most environmental spaces. And they're talking all this climate science and they're talking all this stuff, and there's sounds like, oh, I don't know what's going on. However, it's important that we be there, like I said, because these are very important decisions that impact us, that impact our lives, that impact the quality of our lives, right? Like, I don't want to have, like, fortunately, I don't have bronchitis. I don't have asthma. I don't have any of these breathing challenges. But guess what? A lot of Detroiters do. A lot of children do. A lot of elders do. A lot of my comrades do. And it's because these diabolical corporations have polluted our air and our water and our land so much that it's seeped into our food. It's seeped into everything, when we bathe and all of that. And so um it's really important that we go to these meetings, because what they do, they'll just pass something. They'll just pass it because the majority wins or whatever, and if I'm like the only one there saying like, well, people don't want that. How do they know I'm one person? They don't even know. I look like no one cares. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's like 30 of them or 50 of them in the meeting, and then like me. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and I'm telling them, and then, of course they got their people that they get to say whatever they want to say. But like I said, because of this, a lot of this stuff is not able to be understood. If they give somebody a couple dollars, you know how it is in the hood. People are like, oh yeah, sure, I love it. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of stuff goes in our neighborhoods. They come to these community organizations, give them a couple dollars, and then they roll with whatever. You know what I'm saying? And we just have to be here to say that this is like our community. This is the way we want our community run, or we want this or don't want that, or we just have to speak up and speak for ourselves. So I'm really trying to grow this movement. I put hip hop in the title because I'm a part of the hip hop community, and I really think the hip hop community has potential to move a lot of stuff. What sucks about the city of Detroit is that, unfortunately, a lot of our politicians also are able to like control our hip hop artists. I'm gonna let that sink in for half a minute, but it's true. Mm. Water tastes so good. I'm drinking water, y'all. Um, man, I just been talking and talking and talking. I'm like, I put my glasses down somewhere. I don't even know where I put them. Oh, I put them here. Let me see. So, yeah, I want to see, you know what it is? Our folks are still so wrapped up in the capitalism. It's very difficult to get them untwined from it. And me and Kari always have this argument about capitalism, and it's cool. I consider capitalism exploitation. When I'm talking about capitalism, Piper Carter, when I talk about capitalism, I'm talking about exploitation. When they brought the Africans over here and enslaved them, that was the beginning of capitalism on this soil. And our bodies were used to create the wealth that this society is continuing to benefit from. So, yes, I do believe in full reparations. And full reparations to me is also a part of environmental justice, because if we had full reparations, it means to make whole. And it means that we would be making not only the people who were exploited, or the people who are descendants of those who were exploited, and those who are continually exploited, because we're, you know, encompassing Jim Crow, we're encompassing the unjust systems that we are uh victims of to this day, right? And if we were to create ways in which everyone could have access to fresh water, clean fresh water, clean fresh food. All of it is, within access, right? So it's affordable and it's healthy and it's clean and it's not a GMO. Um, I'm gonna include all the things, in there. Um, Education, right? Transportation. Um, I mean, the original reparations package that was put forth is pretty robust. I'm gonna be honest with you. And it does include ways in which everyone has access to healthcare and, even higher ed, and loans are forgiven. And I mean, it does also include everyone getting a check. And if like I know, and you just saw, like I just saw, um, how many wars have basically paid what the fee is for reparations, like 5 times over. So, obviously, when they tell us that it would bankrupt the system, they're lying, because the amounts that have been asked for have are a fraction of what's been spent on these wars, on the tanks, the weaponry. Uh, they're continuing to build missile bases, nuclear reactor plants, and diabolical things that can destroy the country. That's why these people are building bunkers. That's why these people are figuring out how they're going to leave this planet and colonizing other planets and the moon, and figuring out how to redo the atmosphere, because they're testing out the nuclear power, right? And how it can fuel their rockets, right? And this might sound like, ooh, but I read this stuff in the Wall Street Journal. I read this stuff in the New York Times. I'm reading these in scientific section of the newspaper. Okay. So these are not conspiracy theories. They're actual actions that are conspiracies, right? And when they're trying to push in the state of Michigan, like I said, I'm gonna bring Jesse Water to talk about it. But when they're trying to push in the state of Michigan for us to have nuclear power, look it up. They're pushing for us to have nuclear power. It's because this is the leftover from the military uh waste, I'll say, of them creating what they need to fuel the things that are fueling their wars. And so none of these things are isolated. When people say things like, "Oh, I'm not worried about them people over in Palestine because that ain't got nothing to do with me." It has everything to do with you. Everything. The same Israeli police force, militarized police force that is oppressing the Palestinians is the same training force that's training the Detroit Police Department in how to do these same military tactics on the black and brown citizenry in the hood. The same. The same contracts, the same tactics, the same training, the same uh we talked about these food systems, and that's why we talk about these things in terms of systems of oppression. Is not about, when we talk about racism, we're not talking about like white people. We're talking about a system of white supremacy, white hegemony, if you don't like the word white supremacy, where whiteness is centered and elevated as important, where whiteness is looked to as valuable above the lives of everyone else, and where it is protected at all costs, where the military and the police are created to protect white wealth and white people with wealth. Let's get that together. And that's why we say it's not about people, because they definitely don't care about poor white people. And we're seeing that. And when we talk about systems of oppression, we're talking about food systems, the way in which the corporatocracy has hijacked the food system, Monsanto. There's a documentary on Monsanto where they had been murdering farmers, and they had gone door to door telling the farmers that they had to plant whatever it was. I think it was a soybean or something. It was either soybean or corn, or maybe one of each. And the farmers were like, "I'm not planting that because that crop is homogenous," meaning it's the same crop. And when you plant, you have to like change your crops in order for your soil to be healthy. If you continue to grow the same crop over and over and over, it's going to destroy your soil. And that's a whole thing. But they went first and they told people to plant it. So all the people that didn't just do it when they were told to do it, then they offered them like an exorbitant amount of money. And then those people were like, then the last group of people was the people who was like, we're not doing that. And so they started like planting. So the people who they were able to convince to like plant it, and the people they paid started planting. And then because it was this like weird GMO, it started like blowing like over onto the other crops, and it started in like mixing with and mutating with the other crops. So it started destroying their crops. And so because they weren't like registered to grow the crop or whatever, then Monsanto got like them cited for like violations, and then they had all these high violations that they had to pay. And then the ones who were able to survive those fines and all those things, then Monsanto went to them and bullied them some more. And then the ones who didn't acquiesce, they murdered. It's in the documentary. It's diabolical. Okay. And that's why you have Monsanto controlling the entire food system. And it's such a disgusting corporate entity. If you go to Whole Foods, Whole Foods was one of the first ones to fight them off. But as we know, they lost, and then Amazon bought Whole Foods. And that's why when you go to Whole Foods, you'll notice if you go to the so-called like fresh food, like grocery section, you'll have it labeled and it's like organic. And then the other one just like doesn't say anything. And you have to be careful about organic because Monsanto patented the word organic. And so, well, not the word, but they patented like this organic seed or something like that. So when you say organic, it doesn't even mean what it used to mean. Organic used to mean like no pesticides and no chemicals and all the things. And now organic means something totally different. So organic or you can have an organic GMO, which is what Monsanto has created. It's freaking Franken foods. But I think there's a documentary about that as well. But anyway, y'all can see I can go on this type of stuff. Let me see where we are. Uh yeah, HR 40 that I was talking about the reparations. Yes. Thank you. Right? At large group says you got to rotate the crops. You got to rotate the crops. And Ben Frank says it's a intergalactic constitution is real. Yeah. Oh, I want to say peace to Ben Frank. I want to say peace to Jaman. I want to say peace to At Large Group. Yeah. So anyway, I can talk all this environmental justice stuff forever and ever because it's something I'm super passionate about. And something that I want to do is do more teachings around environmental justice and do more teachings around um the intersections of hip hop and environmental justice and see how we can um work better to get more folks to be on the same page. And on the same page means that we understand what the issues are. I think a lot of what our challenge is that we don't understand the issues. We do. But so for instance, I know Styles P has a juice bar. I know that Stickman has like RBG Fit Club, and I think his wife has a health food business of sorts. Um, I've been meeting a lot of people that are getting more into health. I know there's Sarok is a proponent of healthy eating and veganism. My husband, P Groove, shouts out to him, music producer, made music with Jay Dilla and Proof and legendary on his own, Hypnotic Records. He uh co-owns a juice bar over on the east side. Go support them, Jungle Juice Bar. I'm gonna make a commercial for them. Jungle Juice Bar. It's on Meringue off Kelly, so go support. Um, and then again, like a lot of our National Black Food and Justice Alliance folks do arts and culture. There's a lot of folks in our community. I know Erica Badu is always supporting or uplifting. healthy living and spirituality and being a doula and this kind of thing. And I know, Queen Afua's son is has been heavily involved. And most of us in my sphere, culture sphere, a lot of us are looking at ways that we can be better in the world, more conscious about ableism, meaning uplifting our disabled, folks. I mean, there's a whole crip hop movement. There's the healthy eating movement, the yoga, hip hop, the trap yoga, the whole like my mentee Brittany, who used to do this show with me, she started her food company, It's Food Detroit. Uh Also, um just a lot of people in community are proponents of healthy living, healthy eating, and hip hop, and arts and culture. And I think um if we could do, like you said, more campaigns, more music videos, and give more visibility through the arts, um to shift the culture, right? To less consumerism, right? I think we need to do that. You know what I'm gonna do? I think I'm gonna bring Jesse on next week to talk about this nuclear. But um I want to look at that film. Um Raquel Cepeda has a film, and it's is it called Blood Diamonds? I think it's called Blood Diamonds. I want to look at that film. I think that'd be a good place to start, because that's kind of like that issue around black capitalism and consumerism and the apathy of Africans that are currently in slave trades around the things that black people consume, like diamonds and gold and these kind of things that in the songs are elevated as to points of identity that make people more valuable. The ways in which the invisibilized labor is exploited, and the ways in the role that black, obviously there's a larger systemic role. I'm saying more to the role that black people play in continuing to uplift this narrative. That's what I think we need to resist against. And um I think some of the things that are a little more blatant is the so-called violence. When we say stop the violence, or we resist the violence, or we don't want any more violence in our communities. But capitalism, I would argue, is violence. And the ways in which capital is used to continue to perpetuate violence and create violence and uphold violence, whether it's making people be violent against one another, or enacting violence against whole countries or whole races of people, or yeah, I want to like help us. I want to look at the Blood Diamonds film probably in like 2 weeks or something like that. I want to look it up. I'm gonna watch it, take notes, and bring the film here. Um So wait, Jaman, are you still here about the military waste? Yeah, the military is the biggest polluter in the world, in the entire world, the largest polluter in the entire world. Um, what are you saying there? So, at large group said diamonds are worthless, but we have been duped into buying them. The stone is plentiful like dirt. So, right. And on top of that, this film uh basically focuses on it was Paul Wall, Tego, the reggaeton artist, and Raekwon, the chef. And Raquel Cepeda made the film. She connected with, I think, the dudes from Australia or whatever. And they went to Raekwon's neighborhood in Shaolin. And of course, they do the poverty porn, like looking around to see all the poor people on the phone or whatever, selling each other drugs and yo, yo, yo. And Raekwon is doing a voiceover like, "Y'all don't want to see the reality, yo. This the reality of the streets, yo. This the real. Y'all want to look. Y'all can't look at that. This who we are." Blah, blah, blah. Then they go to Paul Wall's community, and I think, where is he from? I don't want to say the wrong city, but whatever city he's from, another poor black city. I know Paul Wall's white, but the poor black city that he's from, and they kind of do the same thing. So you get to see that. And I think his homeboy makes his diamonds, if I'm not mistaken, makes his jewelry. And then there is Tego, who's a reggaeton artist, and he takes them to Puerto Rico, to his barrio where he's from. And all of them are like, "Oh, this is the poverty, the reality that y'all don't want to see," type of thing. And then they then they meet up with a child, an adult who had previously been a child soldier and in Sierra Leone, and maybe a decade before. And if I'm not mistaken, but they meet in the United States. I'm feeling like it was New York City. I may be wrong, but they meet, and then he talks about his plight, having to be a child soldier, having to do things that he didn't want to do for survival, and the atrocities that he and different people in his community suffered as a result. And then they go on a plane and they go to Sierra Leone, and they go to the amputee. Well, first they go to a I guess it's like a dinner or gathering, and it's these maybe previously they were all child soldiers, and they meet up and they talk about their experiences. And uh somebody had on like a Tupac shirt. I can't remember who. One of them had on a Tupac shirt, and one of the Americans had on a Tupac shirt. And one of the African brothers was like, "We don't." I mean, some of them say they love Tupac, but they say like, "Yeah, Tupac was traumatizing." They said because the uh I may have the side wrong. I think, is it the military soldiers? But it was like the vigilante military soldiers. They didn't, when they would recruit people from the city. So imagine like cartels, or like we call them gangs, here in the States. But when they recruit people, they would recruit them out of like desperate situations, right? So they would like murder their parents, and then they wouldn't have parents, they wouldn't have nowhere to go. They'd be like a little kid, and they would be in need, and so they'd bring the kid on to the pack, and now they got to be a part of this pack, and they have to do all these atrocious things like kill for them in order to survive. And they said that when the soldiers and things would come to the village, they would come because they had recruited all these young people. They didn't have enough uniforms for all these young people. So they would have these Tupac shirts. So they were saying that when they saw a Tupac, it was frightening, because the Tupac shirt meant that these people were coming to your village to like rape and pillage. And so that was that. And that was like, whoa. And then they go to a home of orphaned young girls, and all the young girls have are orphaned and they have all been raped. And their parents have been murdered, and so that's where they put the girls, and so they're in like therapy and all these other things. And the crazy part about that is Paul Wall decides to like give them Nikes. So they all get like this fresh pair of like white Nikes for like I don't know. And then that's interesting because they do this whole like thank you dance. And Africans, like, we'll dance and party for like we don't need much. But it's a little annoying part because it's like a white guy comes and gives some sneakers and start dancing, and I try to separate myself from how I feel about it, but it's very difficult. Um and then although the dance they do is dope. um and then they go to an amputee village, and the amputee camp rather. So what happens is, because of progress, these corporations hire the people in the village, many of them who were like these child soldiers and the like, who are desperate to like be in charge of these diamond mines, and they're looking for productivity. Like they just need productivity. And so um if they are basically employing, if that's what you want to call it, I would say enslaving the whole population of people, except for people who like just can't work. So the people who live in these camps are all the way from like little babies, like 4 and 5 years old, like all the way up to like elders who have had a limb cut off because uh the person who was in charge used them as an example to say that they weren't working fast enough and they wanted everyone else in the camp to work faster. And so they would so you just see, I mean, it's breaks your heart because you see like people just dragging their bodies across to get from one place to another, right? If you don't have like a walking aid. So it's like a lot. And they have one tent set up with the imam, so they have the mosque, and they have another tent set up with the pastor, so they have a church, and then you see like all the people going back and forth, and a lot of them have been shunned. They're not to be looked at, or they're like have to live in shame. It's heartbreaking, and they don't turn away. And what's wild is in that part right there, Raekwon, they go there, I think, like, by bus or something. I don't remember, but they get there, and, Paul Wall goes in there and listens to them and talks to them. So everywhere they go, they listen and talk to people. But in this one particular village, Raekwon is like, "I ain't going there, man. I ain't going there. I can't go there." And he doesn't get off the bus. He refuses. He's like, "I can't look at them. I can't look at them." And the tour guide or whoever the white man was, he's like, "Come on, Ray, you've got to look. Remember when we went to your village in the Shaolin and you said people didn't want to look at the poverty? Look at them, Ray. These are your people, Ray. These are your people. Look at them, Ray. This is who the people are." I think they finally got him off the bus or whatever, but it took a lot out of him. And then after that, they went to a factory. Uh, yeah, it was like a factory where they processed the diamonds or whatever. And Ray tried to boss up on the guy, like, why are you doing this to the people? You see what you're doing? And the guy was like, "Yo, I just manage this place. I don't run this industry or this business. I'm a worker." So it was that type of thing. And then at the end, they end up going to um the Gory Island. And um that's really hard because it's on the sand on the beach, and the whole thing is trash. It looks like a landfill. It is a landfill. and it's just trash everywhere. Seagulls and trash like everywhere, and you see these kids just like walking in all the trash, pounds and miles and piles of trash with no shoes, just walking around. And before then, whenever people would see them, they'd be like, Wu Tang, Wu Tang, hey, Wu Tang. They'd be all excited. But when they got here to the end, these people were like basically like cursing, like, F you, man. You ain't nobody to me. And Ray was like, man, he tried to like, what's up, man? And the young man just treated him like crap. And he's like, what's up, man? What's up? What's up? And he gave him like the harshest, most condemning non-greeting. And it reminded me of if you went all the way back to the beginning of the film when you saw the so-called like thugs in Shaolin in the projects. It was very, very that, as they say. And yeah, so um he possibly understood that aggression and that anger. I hope he did. But they were like, yo, you come here, you think you're famous, you think you got your money. What, you came to look at us? We don't want to look at you. We don't care about you. You're not one of us. And he was like, I'm one of you. He's like, they were like, nah, you wear diamonds, you rich, you got money, you're not one of us. That broke his heart, you know. I mean, he talked about it, you know, afterwards. He claims it was a life transformational experience. I know when he got back, they did some articles saying he denounced diamonds, but I've seen him in diamonds since then, so I don't know how transformational it was, but whatever. Any hootie rooty tootie, I took y'all through most of the main points of the movie, but I want to go. I want to get permission to see if I can go through the movie here so that y'all can see the film because it's really powerful. I know it's mad old. It's like 20 years old, but powerful indeed. It is. And if there's any other media that y'all want to go through, I think media is very helpful tool for us to even understand a lot of the issues that are impacting us. What did just say there? So Jaman said, I didn't know they use nuclear waste to power reactors for energy. It is wild, Jaman, and they shouldn't be doing it. And that's why we're going to bring Jesse on here because I want y'all to know what they trying to do. Jaman says, wild for exactly the reason you're saying the military is the largest polluter. It's like an effed up version of recycling. Yeah, so they try to say that it's clean energy, but um it's dirty. Let's just say that it's dirty all around. So yeah, y'all been rocking with me for a minute. I've been on here for wow. I've been talking nonstop. That's how you know that I really care about these issues. But you've been rocking with Piper Carter podcast right here on Detroit is Different Podcast Network. Peep the description for ways to stay in touch with me and support. I'm really hoping to bring y'all a lot of value this year. And I want to grow my Patreon. So if y'all want me to do ideas that are a little bit racy in terms of environmental justice to talk about, we can talk about them over there. But I'm really looking to do a better job over here on YouTube to serve y'all and to bring y'all engaging and information and useful information. And I'm also looking to recruit y'all into the movement, no doubt. We need more of us, especially that look like us, because there's a lot of people that don't look like us that's making decisions for us that don't benefit us. You got me. As a matter of fact, they hurt us. So yeah. I appreciate y'all for stopping by here. Shouts out to Kari Frazier for being a great proprietor. And I'm doing the best I can to bring y'all more quality every single time. Oh, wait, who is this? So Zay Crescendo says late, but definitely rewatching. Yeah, let me know what you think. I was just kind of recapping a lot that's going on in Detroit as far as the environmental justice movement, and just looking for us to do more music videos, more films, and more media that is healthy and serves us, but then also teachings around it and things that teach us, and just want us to continue to grow our movements in ways that are tangible so that we're all involved in some sort of organization that's organizing and that's active and that's doing all we can to resist all these things that they're trying to do to us, but also that we're building the world in which we want our next generation into 7 generations to live into. So I'm Piper Carter. This has been the Piper Carter podcast on Detroit is Different. I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me for as long as you did. And I'm going to see y'all next week, 8 p.m. Eastern. Peace.